Before we cover those events, which are the subject of another chapter, we need to look more closely at the events that precede the last seal, events which are pronounced by seven thunders during the time of the sixth seal. Thunder perfectly describes what is happening before the final end-time storm of destruction strikes this earth. The final storm will engulf the whole earth for 3.5 years, but as that storm approaches, the rumbling of this thunder will be heard with increasing intensity. These seven thunders parallel another prophetic analogy that describes this time of the sixth seal. This prophetic period was described earlier as a pregnant woman in labor pain. This analogy is magnified in the revelation of the seven thunders. The seven thunders will be declared in the remainder of this chapter. Those thunders have never been announced before now. Everything else that John wrote, concerning the seven seals, seven trumpets and the seven last plagues, was declared by an angel. The seven thunders did not come from angels. John heard the sound of seven thunders. It concerned a message about an end-time prophet of God. The specifics of the seven thunders were left for this end time, in order to be declared to be pronounced by God's end-time prophet, the spokesperson of the two end-time witnesses. More about this will be explained in the sixth thunder. 91 A worldwide storm is brewing, and warning of that approaching storm is contained in 7 distinctive types of thunder. Each thunder will be described, but you need to understand that the thundering is like the pregnant woman in labor pain. All 7 thunders will increase in intensity as this great end-time storm approaches, but one type of thunder will be more pronounced than another from one great labor pain to another. Each type of thunder will continue to rumble, but at certain times one will be much louder than all the others. Each time that one of the 7 thunders is much louder, far more pronounced, than all the others is a time that fulfills the prophetic type of a woman in labor pain. The 7 thunders have much to do with how God will reveal his two witnesses. These thunders serve as a prelude to the final tribulation, and the greater manifestation of the two witnesses. The revelation of the 7 thunders has everything to do with the revelation of God's end-time witness about man, and God's revelation of his two witnesses to man. Sadly, most will choose to ignore what they hear. The first thunder, September the 11th, 2001, was a day that thundered so loudly that the very mention of it is recognized all over this world. Mention that day anywhere on earth and people know what happened. However, people do not yet recognize the real meaning behind why this day is so vastly important. What happened in New York, Washington, D.C. and a field in Pennsylvania is not what is most important about this day. What happened on a biblical plane is of far greater significance. This date became etched in the minds of people throughout the world, and so did another word. That day began to put the 92 name Al-Qaeda into the minds of all who had 9/11 written in their memory. The greater reality for this day is its biblical significance. The events of this day are prophetic, and the prophetic symbolism of these events is the very thing that will lead to the opening of the 7th seal of Revelation, and a full-blown World War III. Terrorism and war are not new to mankind. This has been the way of man for thousands of years, but this terrorism is part of end-time prophecy, and this is what makes it different from all other acts of war. Number 1. The first thunder is the beginning terror of war for the end time. This is war that is prophetic for the end time. All 7 thunders contain things that have occurred on the earth in one way or another ever since man's beginning. Terrorism is not new. Wars are not new. But what is happening now, in these 7 thunders, is new because it is part of end-time prophecy. All these things will lead directly into the final 3.5 years of great physical tribulation on all the earth, with ever-increasing intensity. The success of Al-Qaeda's terrorist attack on 9/11 was the beginning of the first thunder. This was the very day the 6th seal of the Book of Revelation was opened. So the events of this day have very great biblical and prophetic significance. Terrorism is war, and war is terror. An American Civil War general, William D. Sherman, is recognized for a famous quote, in which he said, "War is hell. Any way you address it, war reigns terror wherever it strikes." Since 9/11, we have seen more rumblings from the terror of war. There are continuous rumblings on a lesser scale as 93 Al-Qaeda operatives strike at various times and places in the world. However, as time passes, they will strike with far greater power than 9/11. At this time, the beginning rumblings of war are coming from Iran, and will lead into greater global terror. Louder rumblings from the terror of war have occurred as a direct response to 9/11. On October 7, 2001, the United States began bombing Afghanistan in what was called Operation Enduring Freedom. In actuality, it stirred up greater resentment and hatred toward Americans, in much of the world, more than it produced the promotion of freedom. Al-Qaeda was dislodged from one part of the world, but its influence and strength has grown much greater since then. As for Afghanistan, it has successfully returned to its former economic base, being the world's largest producer of illegal opium. Notice the following quote from the business section of a BBC News article dated March 3, 2003. Afghanistan retakes heroin crown. Afghanistan retook its place as the world's leading producer of heroin last year, after US-led forces overthrew the Taliban, which had banned cultivation of opium poppies. The finding was made in a key drug report, distributed in Kabul on Sunday by the US State Department, which supports almost identical findings by the United Nations last week. Another great rumbling from this same thunder occurred on March 30, 2003, when the United States began its shock and awe bombing of Iraq. This was a great labor pain, because it had a powerful prophetic impact on the attitudes of countries around the world. This moved nations into prophetic alliances, which will become fully realized when WW3 begins. 94 September the 11th, 2001 is one of the more significant days in end-time prophetic events. It was the day the sixth seal of Revelation was opened, and the day the first of the seven thunders began to sound. The events of this day summarize in prophetic symbolism what is to follow once the seventh seal of Revelation is opened: the complete demise of the United States and her closest allies. The prophetic symbolism of 9/11 from the vantage point of all the nations of the world. There could be no greater symbolism of the height of the greatness and wealth, might, and stature of the United States than the World Trade Center towers. To better understand some of this symbolism, let us consider some of the history about these towers. The World Trade Center towers were best known for its iconic 110-story Twin Towers. The towers survived a bombing on February 26, 1993, but all of the original buildings in the complex were destroyed in the September 11, 2001 attacks. Towers 1 and 2 collapsed, and the others, numbers 3, 4, 5, and 6, were damaged beyond repair and later demolished. Building 7 collapsed in the late afternoon on the day of the attacks. The towers were initially conceived as a complex dedicated to companies and organizations directly involved in world trade, but they at first failed to attract the anticipated clientele. During the WTC's early years, various governmental organizations became key tenants, yet it was not until the 1980s that the city's perilous 95 financial state eased, after which an increasing number of private companies, mostly financial firms tied to Wall Street, became tenants. The towers were best known for its iconic 110-story Twin Towers, but these two towers also served as an icon to the greatness of a nation. Even as the name indicates, they were established upon the ideal of a center for world trade, which the United States has fulfilled for several decades now. The towers were symbolic of the stature of Wall Street itself. The destruction of all 7 towers of the World Trade Center, as the destruction of an icon, should not escape biblical students concerning such symbolism. This is indeed prophetic to the collapse of the United States, which will occur at the opening of the 7th seal of Revelation. Such an event should no longer be measured in years, but in months. The plane that struck the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. on the same day should not escape us either. Prophetically, not even the military might of the most powerful nation on earth can escape the judgment of God. The second thunder. There is another rumbling that has been increasing in intensity over the past couple of years.